I would like to thank the organizer to have invited me. I'm very happy to be there. I was lucky enough to be to the first symposium, and I am happy to see how much we have progressed since this time. And we are going to speak about pediatric sarcoma associated with Lee-Fraumeni syndrome. As you know, sarcomas are one of the most frequent tumor in children with P53 mutation. In the survey performed by Thierry Frébourg team and published in 2015, among 132 tumors in 70 patients, sarcomas accounted for 45%, with the soft tissue sarcoma in blue here, mostly in young children, and the osteosarcoma in yellow in older children. The question whether we don't know very precisely how many of the, what is the percentage of patients with pediatric sarcoma harboring a P53 mutation, and according to the studies and the way we approach this question, the percentage varies from 3% to 8 to 10%. And now there are a lot of data from pangenomic analysis of tumors associated with blood, which will help us to better estimate the prevalence of P53 germline mutation in these patients. Now, if we focus on certain group of patients, such as the anaplastic rhabdomyosarcoma, which is a very rare subtype of rhabdomyosarcoma, then we go to a higher percentage of patients carrying a germline P53 mutation, 80% in this small series of patients published in 2014. When we are in a patient newly diagnosed with a sarcoma in children, the question the only way to diagnose a Lee-Fraumeni syndrome is when there is a familial history of cancer fitting with the Champrey's criteria. If you don't have that, you will have to wait until the second malignancy is there to diagnose this predisposition syndrome, unless you have a specific histology, such as the anaplastic rhabdomyosarcoma. And our aim in this study was to see whether we could find signs which would alert the pediatric oncologist to look for Lee-Fraumeni syndrome in patients with sarcoma. So we wanted to describe clinical characteristics and outcome of pediatric sarcomas associated with germline P53 mutation, and to evaluate the risk of multiple malignancies according to treatment. So we identified patients through the national database of Lee-Fraumeni syndrome in Rouen University Hospital, with additional data from Pediatric Oncology Center in France, and also from a large database of the large osteosarcoma trial, which was just finished in 2015, and in which we had information about associated predisposition syndrome. We collected data with a specific form, with personal and familial history of cancer, characteristics of the tumor, response to treatment and outcome, and we are performing a pathologic review, which is still ongoing. Overall, we identified 57 patients with 82 sarcomas, 26 with a rhabdomyosarcoma, 43 with an osteosarcoma, 12 with both, and as several patients had several osteosarcoma, overall we had 66 osteosarcoma. For the soft tissue sarcoma in blue in this diagram, we did not limit the period of treatment. So we have patients treated between 1960 and 2010. For osteosarcoma, in order to have a better homogeneity in the treatment, we limited the inclusion of the patient to patients treated after 1980. Some of these patients had had a previous malignancy. For rhabdomyosarcoma, only one patient was diagnosed with synchronous adrenocortical carcinoma, but in osteosarcoma, which are diagnosed later, 37% of the patients had a previous malignancy with 18 tumors, and most of these tumors were rhabdomyosarcoma. We also had 3 adrenocortical carcinoma, and one of each neuroblastoma, Burkitt lymphoma, neuroblastoma, and fibrosarcoma. Previous treatment included chemotherapy in 15 patients and radiotherapy in 10. The diagnosis of Lee-Fraumeni syndrome had been performed in the patient himself, a diagnosis of rhabdomyosarcoma or during its treatment in 7 patients out of 21, and after a second malignancy, in 12 out of the 21 patients tested, and in 5 patients, it was inner-relative after the occurrence of a cancer inner-relative. And when we could analyze both patients in 18 patients and could show that 4 of these 18 patients had a de novo mutation. For osteosarcoma, the diagnosis of Li-Fraumeni syndrome had been performed before the diagnosis of osteosarcoma in 2 patients. It was performed during the treatment in 12, after a second malignancy in 14, and probably for familial reason in 5. And in this population, in osteosarcoma, we had 9 de novo mutations, including the 4 of the patients with previous rhabdomyosarcoma. Some families were families with an excess of sarcoma, such as this one, in which we have 3 rhabdomyosarcoma in 3 generations, and another sarcoma in another patient here. The median age at diagnosis for rhabdomyosarcoma was 22 months, so very young children, as compared to 56 months for unselected series of rhabdomyosarcoma. For osteosarcoma, it was 13 years, as compared to 15 years, and probably it's not very different for the osteosarcoma. The sex ratio was the same than for unselected rhabdomyosarcoma, whereas for osteosarcoma, where there is a clear male predominance in unselected series, here there was equal number of female versus male. The localization of the primary, for rhabdomyosarcoma, we had a majority of head and neck, we had an excess of limbs localization and less genitourinary than expected. And for osteosarcoma, we had an excess of axial and jaw osteosarcoma, and we had 5 osteosarcoma in the radiation field of a previous rhabdo. The initial extension was as expected. So for rhabdomyosarcoma, we look for lymph node extension. We had 12% of patients with lymph node extension as compared to 21% for unselected pediatric rhabdomyosarcoma. And we have 12% of patients with metastasis as compared with 16% for unselected patients. For osteosarcoma, the percentage of patients with metastasis was the same. What is more interesting is the presence of patients with multifocal disease, so with several bone localization of osteosarcoma, which is quite rare in the general population, in the unselected cases. Here is the histologic review, which is still on progress. For the case review so far for rhabdomyosarcoma, all had an anaplastic histology, either global or focus of anaplastic, foci of anaplastic rhabdomyosarcoma. And for osteosarcoma, we had an excess of surface high-grade osteosarcoma. For the treatment, this tumor required chemotherapy, so most patients with rhabdomyosarcoma had chemotherapy, combining in most patients vincristine, dactinomycin, ifosfamide, and in some cases anthracycline as well. Most patients had surgery, and 46% of the patients had radiotherapy, and the response rate to chemotherapy was just as expected. For osteosarcoma, most patients had chemotherapy, mostly based on high-dose methotrexate. In addition, they had VP16, ifosfamide, doxorubicin, and cisplatinum. Most patients had surgery. And the rate of, in osteosarcoma, we evaluate response by analyzing the specimen resected after initial chemotherapy. And we qualified as a good histological response the patient who have less than 10% viable cells. And this rate was just as expected in sporadic osteosarcoma. For the outcome, the rate of patients in complete remission after the end of treatment was similar to what is expected. The rate of relapse was very similar to what is expected in unselected series, but the rate of second malignancy was much higher. In patients with rhabdomyosarcoma, 69% of patients with second malignancy as compared to 2.3% in patients in unselected series. And for osteosarcoma, 53% as compared to 8% in unselected series. 15 patients with rhabdomyosarcoma died. 3 from the rhabdomyosarcoma, 11 for a second malignancy and 1 from toxicity, and 33 patients of osteosarcoma died, 11 from osteosarcoma, 11 for second malignancy, and 1 from toxicity. So here are the survival curves. At 10 years, nearly 70% of the patients with rhabdomyosarcoma were alive, and nearly 60% of patients with osteosarcoma. But the curve of the event-free survival curve is very poor because of this high risk of second malignancy. And this is illustrated here on the survival curves of progression-free survival, which is not so bad, but second cancer-free survival is very poor in rhabdomyosarcoma and also in osteosarcoma. So the second malignancy, we had overall 50 second malignancy because some patients had several, more than some had 2, 3, 4, even 5. And if we look at the spectrum of this second malignancy, we had a lot of sarcoma, a few breasts, and then some other type of second malignancy. It's a little different from the classical spectrum of lymphomany, but probably because those patients are still young. Now, if we try to analyze the effect of radiotherapy. We focused on the group of rhabdomyosarcoma, since osteosarcoma, they don't require radiotherapy. We had a group of 15 patients who had radiotherapy for the rhabdomyosarcoma or a relapse of the rhabdomyosarcoma, and 11 patients who had no radiotherapy. The follow-up of these two groups of patients is the same. The number of patients with a second malignancy is the same. The number of second malignancy is the same. So it illustrates the fact that it is not only radiotherapy that we have to avoid in this patient, but chemotherapy is as toxic as chemotherapy, as radiotherapy probably. And in the patient who had the second malignancy after radiotherapy, not all the malignancy were in the radiotherapy field. So if we just summarize what we just have said, the rhabdomyosarcoma have a young age at diagnosis, an excess of lymph site, a low incidence of bladder prostate, an excess of anaplastic histology, no impact of the T53 mutation on treatment and failure rate, and high incidence of second malignancy. For osteosarcoma, excess of axial site, including jaw, excess of surface osteosarcoma, no impact on treatment on failure rate, high incidence of multiple osteosarcoma, and high incidence of second malignancy. We just have to be aware that patients are tested when they have a second malignancy, so this may artificially overestimate the risk of second malignancy. Since we may have some patients with P53 mutation not diagnosed because they have not yet developed a second malignancy. So how could we reduce the risk of second malignancy? Most patients, or large proportion of patients, are cured from their sarcoma with the current treatments. And we still do not have developed alternative strategy in most pediatric subtypes. In addition, we don't know very precisely the respective role of chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and genetic background, and this is something very important to do in order to try and eliminate from the treatment what is too toxic. What is easy to do is, whenever possible, favor large surgeries rather than radiotherapy or intensified chemotherapy, but usually pediatricians work like that and they don't like radiotherapy anyway. And also take into account the genetic background when discussing treatment of patients with borderline tumor, and I insist a little again about surface osteosarcoma and osteosarcomas of the jaws, because probably the incidence of P53 mutation in this group of patients is high, and sometimes discussion to know whether they need chemotherapy or not could be based on the presence or not of a P53 mutation. Of course, we have to test new therapeutic options such as immunotherapy, targeted therapy, or elephant-derived drugs, but we probably need to treat patients at relapse, demonstrate that it is efficient before modifying the treatment of patients who have a 70% chance to be cured of their sarcoma with a classical treatment. what could change a lot of things is early diagnosis of very limited tumor detected through systematic screening of cancer with P53 mutation, because probably it is in those patients that we could try a reduction of treatment intensity. And the last question is, who should be screened for germline P53 mutation? Should all patients, children and adolescents with sarcomas, screened for a germline P53 mutation, or only patients meeting criteria such as Champrey criteria at diagnosis, early age, anaplastic rhabdomyosarcoma, high-grade surface or jaw or periosteal osteosarcomas? Because even though we don't have specific guidelines for treatment now, we could at least offer them adapted follow-up after the end of the treatment, early detection of the second malignancy, and perhaps a better treatment for these second malignancies. And I will just end by thanking all the people who participated to this study, especially Morgane Pondron and Émilie Saucier, who did all the work, and the lab biology, Gaël Boujard and Thierry Frépeau. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurence. That's really a fantastic piece of work. Any questions for Laurence? Yes.
I'm interested in you showed the second malignancy rate in rhabdomyosarcoma patient. So I'm impressed because there's no difference between the with or without radiotherapy. So what do you think about this?
It was quite unexpected. We have to be cautious because it is a very small group of patients. But my main conclusion about that is that you do not have to replace radiotherapy by intensified chemotherapy, because chemotherapy is also toxic. We already knew that, but when we discuss a patient with a P53 mutation and a sarcoma, and that we try to see how to avoid radiotherapy, we should think that chemotherapy is also toxic.
All right, Josh, last question. Thank you.
Yeah, so it may be to consider that it's not the intensive chemotherapy, although that could contribute, but maybe trying to combine all these talks we've heard over the past couple of days, there could be genomic modifiers. And those children who develop rhabdomyosarcoma, that's an indication that they're increased risk for other tumors as well, regardless of the chemotherapy. And I wonder what others think of that idea.
Yes, sure. And when you see the survival curves without second malignancy, it seems that for rhabdomyosarcoma, the risk may be higher than osteosarcoma, and maybe it's because they are very young children on diagnosis, and maybe they have a higher risk because of the genetic background.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much.